This is the I'm Giving Notice podcast, where you get to take control of life's big three and have the career, relationships, and health that you've always dreamed of. Now, get ready to say, I'm Giving Notice, with your host, Mace Haroff.
Hello, everybody. This is Mace Haroff for the I'm Giving Notice podcast, and I want to give you a little insight as to how the next podcast, the one you're about to listen to, came about. I know a doctor in the local medical community from my days working in the medical device world. She's a wonderful, open, and very compassionate person, and I found out that she co-wrote a book called Kiss and Tell, Secrets of Sexual Desire from Women 15 to 97. She co-wrote it with Ann Rogers, who was a former newspaper reporter who focused on women over the age of 45. And I thought this would be a really cool podcast episode. So I went out and I got the book and I read the book, and I got to be honest with you, I couldn't put it down. It has a lot of great information, especially from a guy's perspective. I mean, every guy wants to know the secrets of a woman's sexual desire, right? I don't care how old you are. You want to know what it is. And if you think you know what it is, you're probably going to find out in this interview. You're probably right on some, not so right on others. But one of the things I felt a little challenged with was, do I really want to post this very explicit podcast for my listeners? And I immediately knew that the answer was yes. And here's why. As you know, I'm Giving Notice is about taking control of life's big three: your career, your relationships, and your health. Well, when it comes to intimate relationships, one of the most important things that we have to deal with throughout life is sex. And there's a lot of misconceptions about really what drives a woman's sexual desire. So this is a very honest and open podcast. I think I probably was a little bit uncomfortable at the beginning of the interview, but Dr. Whelihan just has this gift, this way of making you very, very comfortable with something we should all be comfortable with. I mean, sex is natural. It's how we all got here. And if you're uncomfortable, here's what I want you to do. If you're uncomfortable, it's probably because you don't want anyone knowing that you're listening to a podcast about sex. So here's what I advise. Turn off your speakers and plug in your earbuds, and no one will know. That's the beauty of a podcast. It's very private. It's very discreet. But more importantly, what you're going to learn from this interview with Dr. Whelihan is really, really good information. So enjoy the podcast. Keep an open mind. Get comfortable with this information. And you might find that your sex life is going to improve. That's a pretty good ROI for listening to a free podcast, don't you think? Let's introduce Dr. Whelihan. Hope you enjoy the interview. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the I'm Giving Notice podcast. This is Mace Haroff. My guest today is Maureen Whelihan, MD. Dr. Whelihan is a gynecologist with a very busy medical practice, and she is one of the co-authors of the book, Kiss and Tell, Secrets of Sexual Desire from Women 15 to 97. Hello, Dr. Whelihan.
Well, how are you today?
I'm doing just great. And you?
I'm doing fantastic, and what a great discussion we're going to have today.
Well, I hesitate to use this term, but I'm excited about it because it's something to be excited about. Dr. Whelihan, as you probably know, I'm Giving Notice is about helping people to take control of life's big three: their careers, their health, and their relationships. And clearly, we all know, or should know, that sex affects our relationships at times in our lives, and from what I read in your book, for many people throughout their lives. So today, you're going to help to clear up some of the misconceptions about what women want and don't want when it comes to sex. And I think from a male perspective, you're really going to open the minds of men to really hone in and understand what it is that women want. Fair enough?
Fair enough. And I think that you're absolutely right. We can hit all three of your triggers because sex is increasingly important in the relationship. The relationship can't exist without a good sexual intimacy. And finally, the career sometimes interferes with the sex. So hopefully we can cover a little bit of everything today.
I never really stopped to think about that. I didn't think career would be involved, but clearly it is. Very cool. Okay, in your book, you surveyed over 1,000 women with 6 open-ended questions. Should we start with the first one?
Sure.
Okay, question number 1. And this was a question that you asked to, were all of these women your patients?
Right. So how it all began was that I put a flyer, a clipboard with a pen and these 6 questions. There was also a release that they had to sign at the end. So not only were they giving me their most intimate thoughts, but then they had to sign a piece of paper that even though I was telling them this was confidential, their name was on a piece of paper attached, and they really had to trust that I was going to hold all of this information in private. And I was really thrilled, as you read, how open women were about these deepest thoughts and secrets about sex and sexual intimacy. So yes, this was a clipboard with questions in my exam room, and when they were in there waiting for me naked for 20 minutes, wishing I would hurry up and get in there, they had the opportunity to fill out this survey.
Well, the questions, actually the answers to the questions are what are really amazing. So let's go with question number 1. What stimulates your desire? What were the answers, Dr. Whelihan?
So this was probably the most important question because men constantly want to know, how do I get her naked? What do I have to do? You know, why do I have to be nice all the time just to get a little in the bedroom? And so we asked women. And women between 15 years old and 97 filled out enough of the questionnaire or survey fully that we could use those responses, and there were 1,300. So, interestingly, the number one answer across the ages, whether you're 15 or 97, was kissing. Sensual kissing. So not the little peck on the cheek that says, yeah, you're leaving for work, I'll see you later. It was that deep tongue kissing, saliva swapping, sexy kiss. And it didn't matter what the age of the woman was. Kissing was so important. That was the key to getting the clothes to fall off.
And you explained in the book that there is a biological basis for that as well. Isn't that true?
Right. So Helen Fisher was actually on Oprah one day, and she always talks about relationships and how we partner up. And she said, perhaps that when the man kisses us in a heterosexual relationship, that he's transferring his testosterone via the saliva. I think it's more based on the dopamine that raises in the brain. So dopamine is our sex-seeking, pleasure-seeking substance in our brain, which can really get us excited, and it can sometimes get us in trouble. But kissing is number one.
So what do you think, why do people get away from kissing as a relationship matures? Early in the relationship, and you point this out in the book, that's usually the first step towards intimacy, lots and lots of kissing, and then it kind of dwindles. How can we get people kissing again?
Well, you know, that's so funny that you say this, because when I lecture to, say, other physicians, I will often open it up in the room and say, and they're mostly married people and married for, 15, 20 years. And I'll say, when's the last time you laid on the couch on Friday night with maybe a bottle of wine and just kissed, just made out all night? And everybody sort of chuckles and smiles like, I can remember that. But it's remote in most people's memory. And I think it's that kissing requires a wanting and a craving. And I think that when you get into a long-term relationship, you don't want them. You don't crave them because you're aggravated most of the time. You're annoyed at your spouse. You're annoyed at the kids. You're annoyed from work. Whatever it is, aggravation sets in and kissing falls to the wayside. But when I talk to these very people and say, your homework is that for 1 minute every day, and sometimes I say 2, but 2 is really hard to do. So for 1 minute every day, you must engage in a passionate kiss. And when people report that back to me, they say, it's funny. We giggle a little bit when we first start to do it because it seems silly. But when we start to make a habit of it, we actually have more sex. And so, it's sort of a light bulb goes off that says, wow, this touching of our mouths and this digging in and just touching each other that close and intimately with a kiss makes us want to have sex.
That's really, we could stop right now. That's all the information I think anybody needs. Just lots more kissing. That was number one. Is there something that was a close second to kissing?
Yeah, so that was across all decades. Now, if you were in your, say, 30s to 50s, the answer was Grey Goose and cranberry or wine. So it implied that alcohol was required for relaxation. But if I got some of that relaxation, I was more willing to have sex. And then finally, touching my body sensually. So just touch me all over. Now, those women in the 30s and 40s were quick to say, do not go straight for my breasts or my butt, because if you do, I know this touch is not for me, it's for you. So lesson to the men, touch and kiss everything on the body first, because those clothes will fall off, or she will take them off, if you don't go for the prize on the first round of touch.
Wow, great! I'm taking notes here. I'm taking notes because I don't want to forget these things. Let's go to the second question, and that question was, "What's in your brain?" In other words, what are you thinking about during sex? Dr. Whelihan, what are women thinking about during sex?
So I absolutely love, this was one of my favorite questions, because I'm always trying to get into people's heads. What are you thinking when he looks at you this way? What are you thinking about during sex? Well, sadly, the men might be thinking otherwise, but the answers were my grocery list, problems I'm having, got to get those cobwebs off the ceiling. How does my ass look in this position? Oh, please don't touch my belly fat. And only about 20% of them were actually thinking thoughts like, oh, I love my partner and he feels so good inside me, and what position will we be doing next, or I think I'm going to have an orgasm. One patient wrote, she was in her 60s, and she said, oh, that feels good. Oh, wait a minute, was that the cat licking my leg? So while she was really engaged in the moment and getting towards the end point, the cat came in and licked her leg and totally distracted her. Lots of fantasy. I'm fantasizing about a powerful man. I'm fantasizing about a lover other than my husband. Some of them were movie star-like guys. George Clooney came up quite a bit, a few Brad Pitts. But the brain was everywhere in these women, other than where men would like it to be, which is focused with what the interaction is. So, and this really speaks loudly to part of the problem in sexual desire with women, is their brain is just too busy.
That's George Clooney. Wow. you just, a lot of men are going, my wife's thinking about George, or my partner's thinking about George Clooney while we're making love.
Hey, whatever it takes to keep the action going.
Exactly. Well, I think it's, a lot of men have fantasies too that are going on in their heads. So we have to be accepting if our partner wants to be thinking about George Clooney or something else that turns her on, there's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. Listen, I think the longer the relationship goes, and I think it becomes more challenging to keep it fresh and sexy. And so fantasy plays a great role in, and it can be a fantasy you share with your lover or not. It can be a fantasy that you're having within your head yourself. So, but whatever it takes to keep it exciting in the bedroom or in the intimate moment, I think it's fine.
Now, I have to ask this question. You said at the beginning that some women are thinking about their grocery list. It's not that their grocery list turns them on. Would that be correct?
Correct. It just means that they're thinking, okay, they're list makers, so sex with my husband, check. Grocery shopping next, check. Pick up the kids from school, check. They're working down their checklist for the day, and so giving their spouse an intimate moment is just one of the things they're checking off of their busy day. So they're sort of multitasking. Now that they're engaged in that, they're moving on in their brain to the next thing they have to do.
So it sounds like, as guys, we need to be on that list along with all the other tasks. Is that something we should? Yeah, you said yes. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I think what guys need to do, if I could give guys tidbits, and you know, we have cheat sheet for the guys at the end, but when I talk to guys, I try and really express to them how the busy brain is in a woman. And when she says no, she may not really mean no, but she really means I'm not with you right at this moment in this idea. So wind me down. And so he needs to do things that relax her, whether it's touching her sensually or kissing her or sitting her down and giving her a glass of wine or preparing dinner or whatever it is that relaxes her brain. Sometimes it's things like putting on a blindfold. So when you blindfold the woman, she doesn't see you looking at her, so if she has any hang-ups about her belly fat or what her butt looks like in that position, she can't see you looking at her, despite the fact that men really love to look at women when they're naked. And it also unwinds the brain and sort of settles her down so that she can focus on how she's feeling.
The blindfold, was that in the book, the blindfold?
There's information about a blindfold in there throughout the book, but you know, a sleep mask, you know, from Bed Bath & Beyond, you know, less than $10. It is amazing that when you take the vision away from a woman, that her thinking sort of settles down, and whatever her hang-ups are start to settle down too, because she can't see him looking at her.
So there's something to add.
Yeah, and she doesn't have to look at him either. So if she's really mad at him for the day, she doesn't have to. It can be someone else she's partnering with that day. And
it makes George Clooney look even better.
Absolutely.
So we're around the holidays right now. There's something for everyone's gift list, a blindfold. Who knew?
Oh, perfect stocking stuffer. Absolutely.
All right, question number 3, and this is a question I've never asked on my podcast. In fact, we've kind of gotten into the explicit area, and I do have my podcast listed on iTunes as explicit because I want to be able to talk about everything. So question number 3, this is a question you asked your patients. What's your quickest route to orgasm?
So the reason this question came there is because you would be amazed at how many educated couples, well advanced in years, that have been partnering for years with and have had more than one lover, where the male partner does not understand the basic physiology of women and where the orgasm, the easiest orgasm, comes from. There is so much conflict in relationships about her inability to have an orgasm during penetration. I can't tell you how many times a day I am talking about this. And it is because somewhere in the early development of intercourse, while the young girl is having sex with her boyfriend and they're discovering each other, she moans appropriately or gives signals, verbal signals, and he, because it feels good for him, he's rocking her world. And so throughout his life, he believes that she reaches orgasm with his penetration, which 90% of the time is not the case. And so we raised this question to say, okay, here's 1,300 women of all ages. Tell me the quickest way to get an orgasm. 90% of women said clitoral stimulation. No surprise to me if you understand embryology and how we develop and what our anatomy is down there. The clitoris is the exact same structure as the penis. Exactly. So boys and girls in utero look the same till 9 weeks gestation. And then either testosterone is in a high enough concentration in the fetus's blood that the phallus, which is what it's called at that time, grows into a penis. Or if there's no testosterone or inappropriate receptors, it shrinks down and defaults into a girl and a clitoris. It is the exact same sensory structure. One is just longer than the other. If you think about where it's located on the body, same spot. So no surprise that while men derive pleasure from stimulating the penis with the tube of the vagina or wherever else they're placing it, that the clitoris is crucial in a woman's ability to have an orgasm. And until a couple discovers that, there has to be permission giving for her to touch it or him to touch it for her or whatever. And so the question went even in more depth to women. How do you like it? Do you like it oral, manual, vibrator? And it sort of sorted out to the young girls in their 20s liked oral and vibrator. The old ladies, say 60 and above, liked manual, mostly because that's all they were exposed to when they were learning how to have an orgasm. And the 30s, 40s, and 50s said, get on it any way you can because I can get there. So they would take oral, manual, vibrator. And so half of it is letting the ego of the man down by saying, dude, it isn't your magic wand that's rocking her world. While it's wonderful and it feels good, get on that clitoris either simultaneously or prior to keep it exciting for her. She will be much more engaged in the encounter through your lifetime if you address the sensation of the clitoris.
And this was true throughout the majority of the people in your survey, correct?
Yes. So 90% of women of all ages said it's the clitoris. Of the 10% of women who said, I can have an orgasm purely with vaginal stimulation, no hands on the clitoris, no vibrator, 90% of that population said, I have to be on top. So guess what? That's really indirect clitoral stimulation because while she's on top, she can wiggle her hips around to access the stretch because there are quote-unquote legs of the clitoris that go down behind the labia majora, the outer lips. And they would be similar to the structures that go up in the shaft of the penis, right? Those are the parts that fill up. So really, it is all about the clitoris. Now, there are women who can get a vaginal orgasm. It takes a lot of stimulation to the same spot. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of concentration and engagement into how much you love your partner, and it takes no distractions. But it is possible, and it's a full-body orgasm. It's very different, and it's wonderful and long-lasting and extremely fulfilling. But some women will never experience that.
One of the things I really liked about your book is that by dispelling a lot of the myths or false expectations, you've really helped a lot of women to understand and accept that they're normal. Right.
So half of what I do, I don't have any new discoveries that I'm teaching people. I'm teaching people the basic science of how our brains work and how our genitalia functions and how they merge together and how relationships and work and children influence this. And then I make a plan for that couple that says, let's figure out how this is going to work for you. Because what you like is very different than what I like, which is very different than the next guy or gal. And so half the time it's permission giving. I'm often the referee because I'll say something like, you need to, give her oral sex first so that she can have an orgasm and maintain arousal and lubrication throughout the encounter. And she'll tap him and say, see, which I really discourage. I don't really want anybody pointing fingers or keeping points on who is right. Because when I say it, I'm delivering the message from a science-based background, and it seems more believable. Whereas when the partner delivers it to the lover, there's no credibility there. It's just someone has an agenda. So I do a lot of refereeing, and it's nice because they want the message. They hear the message, and they want it. And everybody wants good sex.
One of the things that I was surprised in your book, it seems like there were a fair number of the women who enjoyed watching pornography.
Yeah. So, so many things about women, sort of the myths were dispelled in the book because these are things I hear all the time. I've been a gynecologist for 17 years in private practice, and this stuff I would hear every day. And then I would, repeat this at in a conversation with others. And of course, even the very people who made the comments would never fess up, and I would never tell either, who made the comment. But people would just be amazed at the fact that this happens. And so 20% of women are visual. So we all know that when men see anything naked about a woman, or a nice chest of double D's, or a nice butt and tight jeans, there is some visual trigger that makes that guy want to do her. It isn't her scent, it isn't anything, it's the visual in the majority of men. So 80% of men, it's a visual clue or cue that makes them want to do it. For women, it's just the opposite. 80% of it is the emotion. How much do I like you today? Did you take the trash out? Did you throw your dirty underwear on the floor? The things that aggravate me. But 20% of women are visual, which means they too are turned on by those very triggers that are visual. So no surprise that pornography is a sort of a voyeuristic behavior of watching people have sex. Now, women and men are different. So men sort of cue it up to, the money shot, ejaculation, it's squirting somewhere. Women are more into what I call the takedown, and that is the seduction, where the guy comes upon the girl and, starts to take her clothes off and is talking to her in a way that says, this is what I'm going to do to you. And so women like that, and they generally just like to watch people having sex. And so sometimes, I'll give you a very good example. I had a patient in the other day, and she had to have very disfiguring surgery on her vulva for cancer. So she had to have her clitoris removed. And she said, what am I going to do now? I can't feel sex, but I've always loved sex. She's in her 70s. And my conversation was, we got to find another place for you to discover orgasm. And did you ever consider anal intercourse? And she was like, oh, no. And I said, well, it's another place to have orgasm, and it's very different. And here's a video. So the video was sort of an instructional video that was sort of soft pornography that actually gave her a lesson and her husband on how this would be done and all the different ways to stimulate that area. So she didn't think twice about taking that video from me. She just wanted to put it in a bag before she left my office. And yeah, so there is not one other doctor that takes care of her that would have asked her to consider another area to experience orgasm, and B, here's a video for you and your husband to review that may give you some ideas. And so whether it's soft porn under the guise of education or regular pornography that you can get on the internet or anywhere, it should be considered as an option.
This is when we talk about life's big three relationships. Sex is such a big part of relationships that if something comes into play, such as this woman's surgery, where she was no longer able to enjoy sex, it can have a real and a rather large impact on the relationship that she has with her partner. Why doesn't the medical community address these sexual repercussions from other healthcare issues?
I think the real reason is that your doctors are just like the patients. Everyone has a hang-up or a social or a religious or some kind of conflict. So really it boils down to parenting and how the parent introduces sexuality into that child's education as they're growing up. And what happens? The parents notoriously make sex a really bad thing, especially to the girls, because they don't want them getting knocked up before they get out of high school, and they want them to have a career and, all their lists of preferences that the parent wants out of their child. And so we deliver really bad messages. But guess what? People remember those messages forever. And they later ask me in private, is it really true that if you do this or touch down here that this happens? It's, no, that's not. So parents have to be very careful to deliver a truthful message and within a realm of their comfort. And if not, bring them to me. because I will take it to whatever level that kid or young adult or adult is in what they want to hear. But truthful messaging. So the doctors are as screwed up as the patients in their understanding of sexuality or their ability to discuss it.
You're very easy to talk to. I'm a guy. Obviously, I'm not in your office with you examining me, but I'm finding it very easy to discuss these rather sensitive issues with you. A lot of the gynecologists, the male gynecologists I've seen around the hospital, of course, they run the whole gamut from young to old. Some of them probably look like some women's fathers, these older men with gray hair. And I could see where a woman would have a difficult time broaching these issues with a man. Do you find that to be true?
Right. So it's very interesting because two of my partners in practice were guys. One's 68 now and the other one's 65. And while both of them are very open to discussing sex and very comfortable with sexuality, when their patients, who were long-term patients from the time they were teenagers through their own childbearing and now they're reaching 50, they would start coming to me. And I would often say, Dr. So-and-so isn't able to see you today. Why are you coming to me? And they'd say, well, no, now I've got some sort of unique things going on, and I feel like I just need to talk to a woman about it. Well, that's great because they picked the right woman. I can be more knowledgeable, perhaps, from a woman's standpoint and add to whatever they gave you. But those two guys were actually more knowledgeable than most of the women gynecologists in the area. So it's really about finding the physician, gynecologist, urologist, family practice doctor, who is willing to have the conversation that you want to have. And who brings it up is the real problem. So I say to patients, ask your doctor, can I ask you some questions about sex? Or have the doctor ask the patient. I always tell docs, you should ask every patient, are you having sex? The answer is either yes or no. Is it no interest or no good partner? So at least gives you an idea of, is it her or is it her partner at home? And 50% of the time, it's the partner at home is having erectile dysfunction or premature ejaculation or some other physical ailment that often when I hear it, I can already give solutions through her to him based on how good she is at telling me the problem.
So the bottom line is, if you're not comfortable with the doctor you have in terms of being able to ask that doctor questions about the most intimate part of your life, then you might want to find another doctor.
At least for those problems. So if you love your doctor for 90% of the care you receive, and this is just the shortcoming was going to be my thought there, but if this is the problem that you're not discussing, just seek that counsel. I have people who come to me only to discuss their vaginal dryness and their sexual problems, but are otherwise very committed to their other physician, which is perfect because guess what? That person takes back the information that I've given to her or him and shares it with the doc. And it gives that doctor confidence that they too can have this discussion with the next patient.
It's so important. It's so important. Let's move on to question number 4. Describe the best sex of your life. How old were you and why was it the best sex? Now, that's something we all us guys, we want to know. When a woman thinks she's having great sex, what makes it great sex? We all want to be able to deliver great sex.
Yeah. So what we really learned from this question was there was a moment in time. I can tell you that for many women, it was their first sex after a divorce. So their first lover or their first good lover after a divorce. And that's probably because they felt they knew their body and they were going to go for it. So they were feeling relaxed about their sexuality. And they were just going to go gung-ho into that new encounter. And so they were relaxed and they could enjoy it more.
So you're not saying that if you're not having good sex now, your best option is divorce.
Yeah, no. Well, unfortunately, marriage or long-term relationship is the number one cause of sexual dysfunction. 80% of the people with sexual problems are in a long-term relationship or married. And that really is the psychology of the relationship. So it's really about the bitterness and the everyday stuff that goes on. So when women move on, that it was one of the number one things. Interestingly, after pregnancy, after they had their babies, when pregnancies were over. Why? Because most of them had their tubes tied or some kind of permanent birth control, so they were no longer worried about conceiving. It is amazing how many young women are really secretly worried about getting pregnant again, especially women who have 2 or 3 children. One of their reasons for not doing it is not just because they're tired, because they have 2 or 3 kids. It's because they're fearful of getting pregnant with another. After menopause, surprisingly, was a big one for women because the kids were gone. They had free reign of the house. They could get naked again. They kept this guy long enough. By this time you either love him or you don't. And then finally, after 65, when people retired, was another landmark of, now I'm not working anymore, so my brain isn't so busy. So the real good news was when you graphed all this out, that the best sex of your life was always about a decade behind the age you are now, but it increased with every decade. So the 30-year-old said in your 20s, the 40-year-old said in their 30s, the 50-year-olds in your 40s, and so forth. But some of the 80-year-olds said right now, because they were feeling very open and empowered by this younger generation. So the best sex of your life continues throughout your spectrum of life. It just has different, it comes out in different ways.
The title was one of the most motivating parts of your book, women age 15 to 97. And right now you're talking about a woman in her 80s proclaiming that she's having the best sex of her life. I mean, that really gives us all something to look forward to.
Many, many times a day. Okay, so I had a patient come in the other day. I had a student with me. The patient was using a walker and wearing orthopedic shoes. And she made her way into the room, took her a while to get settled. I think the student was a little floored when I was asking her about her sex life, but I do to everyone. And the patient sat up with such enthusiasm and said, I've met someone, and she's in her 80s. And she lives in a assisted living facility type place. And I guess there was a new guy that moved in, and they had an attraction to each other. And she was so excited. So I figured I would stir things up a little bit for the student's sake. And I said, well, can he get an erection? And she said, I don't know. I haven't seen it yet, but I think so. And I said, well, why do you think? And she says, well, because he was pressing up against me and I think I could feel it. And I said, well, that's even better if you can feel it through the clothing. And of course, my student was losing it in the background. So as we tried to exit the room, her question to me was, wait a minute, I have another question. And I said, what's that? And she says, I want to get laser hair removal. And I said, okay, where do you want laser? Because I was looking at her hair was gray and, the hair I could see was gray. And she said, my bikini. I want to take care of my bikini before I see him for the first time. So even at 82, she wanted to laser her bikini so it looked sexy for her new mate.
I don't think I'm ever going to look at a woman with orthopedic shoes and a walker the same way again. That just became so sexy to me.
I'm telling you, you just never know. I get such a smile on my face when I discover this because it continually fuels what I have learned and what I keep learning about people and desire and how we really feel young. You and your wife and I, we all know that while our chronologic age is getting older, I'm still 25 with 28 years of experience.
Exactly. I always say I feel like I'm still in college, except when I come across a mirror. Then I freak out and go, who the hell is that guy?
I know. That's the bad part. So you really should have low lighting and candles. That's why you need those soy-based candles in the mood lighting for the bedroom when you're older. And by the way, those essential oils in those soy candles double as massage oil. So while you're burning that candle, the liquid in that soy candle with essential oils, you can pour that right on your lover and massage it in. That's massage oil, already heated up.
Wow, this is a very different conversation than I've ever had with a doctor. I'm really enjoying this. Question number, we could just spend so much time on question number 4. I mean, that could be hours and hours of discussion. We got to move on to question 5. I'm such great information here. I mean, the big point here is that everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, but most people think about sex, have thought about sex. It's been a big part of their lives. And it continues to be a big part of their lives, and it's a big part of relationships. So if something's not right, or if you are wondering if something's right or wrong, there are people, professionals like yourself, that they could go to and get answers.
Right. And the problem is there are very few that really hang their shingle or are certified or really state that they do this throughout this United States. They're actually, we only have a few in the state of Florida, but people call from the west coast of Florida, or I have a clinic in Charlotte, so I see people in different states. But sometimes we can do this by phone or Skype or other ways.
Excellent. Well, we'll get all your contact information at the end of our podcast here. I want to go to question number 5. What is the one thing you wish your partner would not do during sex? This is something that's pretty important to know. Right.
So I love it. So the 2 and 5 were my favorite questions because it really talks about function and brain. So in this one, it's really about function. What one thing do you wish your partner would not do in regards to sex? The number 1 answer across the board was try and get in my butt. Now, it was very different because probably 90% of the women that answered that question had never tried it. It was just a no-go zone. It was not going to happen there. That was outgoing only. Yet 10% of the people testified that was some of the best sex there ever was. In fact, they put that up under question number 3, which was best orgasm. So we actually asked women, there are women who testify that this is the best thing, yet you say, no way, Jose, how come, you don't want to get in there? And then they give you their fears. Their fears are the hygiene fears. Their fears are pain. They know that's a much tighter muscle and a much smaller space. So we go over those one by one and say, well, here's how you troubleshoot this. And here's, and sometimes we have prolonged discussions on, well, if you're going to try this first. So that was number 1, trying to get in my butt. Number 2 was, licking my ear. And so while 80% of men love their ears licked or tongue in their ear, 80% of women hate that. So guys generally do to you things that they love when really they should probably not do licking the ear. And the third answer was talking too much or talking dirty during sex. Now that sort of surprised me because I had a pretty open group of ladies. So I asked a 40-year-old lady who I thought was pretty cool. I was like, okay, you wrote talking dirty during sex. Talk to me about that. And she says, look, when I'm having sex with my husband, she says, I'm sort of in my zone and he's talking to me. Tell me what you want. Tell me you want 2 guys on you right now. Tell me this. And she says, no, I need you to shut the hell up because I'm trying to have a fantasy and you're not in it. And so it really wasn't about talking during sex. It was your talking that requires answers is distracting me from my fantasy. So it wasn't about talking. It was distracting me. And I always tell women it's really important to try and moan or do some kind of talk or something to indicate to your partner, A, that you're feeling good and he's on the right spot or he's heading in the right direction, and B, that you're almost there so that he doesn't have to hold out so much longer and he can release and enjoy his own orgasm. So I think there's some room for appropriate moans and indicators, but talking too much or requiring a response during sex would be a no for most women.
I have to ask you, let's say someone is in a new relationship and he or she doesn't know what their partner likes sexually. Now, a moment ago, you were talking about one partner exploring the possibility of anal sex. This generally isn't something that we discuss in society, except when it becomes a punchline for a comedian's joke. So how can you find out what a woman likes when you're first getting intimate?
So first of all, I think most of the comedy routines and all the joking and discussion about any kind of anal stimulation is because people are really, really curious about it, but it's so taboo that it becomes a discussion instead of something that you want to try. And that makes people more embarrassed to even admit that they want to try it, because now everybody's made such a big deal that it's taboo. So I think that in a relationship, first of all, there are so many ways that you can breeze by. So if you're kissing somebody on the neck and you move up, if you're a guy and you're kissing somebody on the neck and you move up and get into her ear, if her nipples get hard and she's, moving into you closer or pulling you closer, guess what? She likes it. But if she keeps tucking her head and pulling away from you, then she doesn't want it. So try and read her body language and not just keep chasing her around the bed to get your tongue in her ear. For anal exploration, I think for the most part, women are embarrassed to talk about what they want to try. And so I think it's reasonable to approach the area with some kind of caution, but with curiosity. So that can be with just the pad of a finger, not penetrating the area, but encircling it. It can be with a tongue. Obviously, all clean body parts are the same. So if you're down there doing something else and you brush by that area, you're going to be able to tell by whether they jump away from you in a minute or whether they stay there and see what you're doing. And this goes the same for men and women, because women always wonder, well, geez, I'd like to try this on my guy. Now, if you ask him, he's going to go, oh, yeah, no, But I would bet that if you just tried it gently, in a playful way, that they probably would be interested in how that feels, because most people are hung up on the thought of it as opposed to being turned off by the feel of it.
Very true. And for men, it's just something that you always equated as being abnormal,
Right.
So, but the point is, no two women are the same. And men always feel like they are these prodigious lovers. They know how to make love to a woman, but the man who really knows how to make love to a woman, if I understand what you're saying and what your book says, I think this is the take-home message, is that they're all different. The man who truly knows how to make love to a woman will find out what turns that woman on and what she likes.
And it can be done in a discussion. So if you're sitting having a glass of wine, and the guy says, and let's assume that you're in a relationship and you're having great sex with your new lover, and he wants to try some things, he can say, last night I had this dream and it really turned me on, and I put you in handcuffs and I had a blindfold on you and you seemed really excited too. And then you pause and see, and if she says, really? Well, what did I do next? Then you're open game. You can try that. If she says, oh my gosh, no, I'm so claustrophobic, and if you handcuffed me in the back, I would be freaking out and I could never relax. Well, guess what? Then you could say, well, how about if I handcuff you together in the front or something? So if you really want to go there, you try and find out. But if it's just a blanket, oh no, then your answer could be, well, what bothers you most about that? Or what turns you off the most about that? And then hear about it, and maybe you can improvise based on the turn off. For the anal intercourse, a lot of people say, well, it seems dirty. I'm like, well, I go through the whole physiology of the lower part is empty and blah, blah, blah. But I say, well, if you want, use a condom when you're going in the back. Then the condom can come off and go right in the trash, and nobody will ever know. And, then women give pause and go, well, yeah, I might try that. So you try and figure out what the hang-up is and offer a solution. And so a guy can do this probably over a glass of wine and try and explore where she'll go with it, but in a non-judgmental and a non-critical fashion, sort of in a fun or boy, wouldn't this be sort of exciting? Or watch a video together and see what parts sort of get her snuggling up closer to you and go, oh, interesting. She wants to try that. So,
Dr. Whelihan, I love this because you're providing lots of actionable takeaways. I hope the guys are listening because you can completely redefine what a Saturday night is going to be like for a lot of men, coming up. One of the things, there's kind of an overriding thing that I saw throughout the book, and you've mentioned it several times on this podcast, and that's discussing it over a glass of wine. You talk about the importance of a woman needing to be relaxed when she's having sex or even discussing sex. Tell me about that a little bit.
So, as you know, a little bit of alcohol is a disinhibitor. So too much alcohol is not a good thing because women actually get dry, and so that would actually lead to vaginal dryness, or they pass out and fall asleep. But there is a critical time where there's enough there that relaxes them. How many people go out and either drunk dial or go out and sleep with somebody who they probably shouldn't, because the brain is sort of relaxed and disinhibited by the alcohol. And so if you're going to have a conversation about sex, sometimes setting the brain in the right mode where your forebrain is not overruling and making you have the conscience that your mother is Catholic mother is sitting in the background saying, what? You're going to do what? So any kind of situation, even if it's not in the bright light of the kitchen and that you're sitting on the back patio with a candlelight where you don't really have to look each other in the eye while you're sharing this information, and that you can hold hands and be talking with each other without, staring each other down, sometimes gets into the conversations a little bit better and makes people feel less awkward about the topic.
Question number 6. This was the last question on your survey. What is the biggest lie you were told about sex?
So that was probably our least favorite question, because it really didn't give us a lot of great information. Most of all, what we learned was most women were not taught about sex. So often the answer was, I was never taught about sex. One young girl wrote, she was in her 20s, and she said, I was told that if you have sex with too many guys, you're a slut. So I say, enjoy the sex and keep the number to yourself. And I thought, well, good for you that she's learned this, because in her mind, no, it's not true. I'm enjoying this. But clearly, if I told people how many, I'm being labeled. So she discovered that in her 20s. Obviously, a lot of, if you kiss a boy in the dark, you can get pregnant. A lot of the older women came up with that. It was interesting. The one theme that did come up a lot in this question was size matters. But we couldn't figure out, well, was that the lie or the truth? But it seemed to boil down when we read the question and interpreted it correctly, that for the most part, size did not matter. And so while many men worry about that, in fact, for women, size did not matter. Now, for the women who have had been blessed with discovering some size in their life, they say, oh, contraire, I know the difference. But overall, a good lover is more than just his size. So they saw the whole package of the guy, and while there may have been a benefit from being well endowed, for the majority of women, the size was not it. It was his sexual prowess, his seduction, his kissing, his mental stimulation to her. It was how nice he was during the day. It wasn't just how well endowed he was.
So a lot of differences between men and women that your book brought to light. And I am so very grateful for that. Dr. Whelihan, like I said, this is a podcast you have far exceeded my expectations. And I'm genuinely grateful that we're able to have a conversation like this. Now, as you're talking, I'm thinking there's probably some listeners who are going to turn this off because they'll be uncomfortable with it. But I think the vast majority who stick with it are going to learn a lot about their sexuality, about themselves. They're going to discover that they're normal. Men are going to certainly discover how to please a woman, how to get a woman turned on. So the only way that things could get better, and we're talking about relationships here, intimate relationships, is if people open their minds and allow themselves to be educated.
And most importantly, to open their minds and allow themselves to interpret what they really enjoy. There was a study that looked at this where they showed women and men videos of various things, including pornography, and they had to write a journal, what turned them on, and there was monitors. And the guys, whatever they wrote in their journal was exactly what the monitor showed for excitement. But when it came to the women, it was completely discrepant in what they wrote in their journal. Oh, that was gross. Was repulsed by that activity. And yet their monitor said, you are aroused and turned on. So I want women to forget what other people say and accept what it is that gives you pleasure and share that with your lover so that you can continue to have great sex for your entire lifetime.
That's a great way to wrap it up. I have to ask you about a quote because I love this quote that you have in the book. And Dr. Whelihan's quote is, women don't have a low desire for sex. They have a low desire for the sex they're having.
So true. So women, I am convinced after interviewing all of these women that women don't, even the very women that come in and write down, today I'm here for low sexual desire. When I talk to them about their sexual desire, they don't have low desire for sex. They have low desire for the sex they're having. And it's all of these issues that we're talking about today, whether it's he's not talking to her with respect, or whether he's just plunging in to get off and he's not addressing her orgasm, or he's challenging her on what gives her an orgasm. You know, that all the other girls he's ever been with, he rocks their world with his penis and it isn't the clitoris. You know, it's the debates and stuff. It's really about that. So that we're going to work on patient by patient.
And I'm so glad that you're doing that, making a big difference. Dr. Whelihan, how can potential patients, anyone who has questions, how can they get in touch with you? So
probably the easiest way is our website, which is www.bestsexualadvice.com. Or you can go through the book's website, which is kissandtellbook.com. Either way, it'll link you and connect you to the others. And then the toll-free number is 888-569-3374 for the Sexual Health Center.
Dr. Whelihan, your book is also available on Amazon. That's where I got it, Amazon.com, both available in the paperback version and in Kindle. And guys, I'm telling you, it is a great read. I was not able to put it down. In fact, I wish I would have read this book about 30 years ago, but the book wasn't written. But I got to tell you, actually, all things being equal, I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty good with what you wrote. So I'm feeling pretty good about this.
Good.
Thank you so much for being a guest on my show. Thank you for writing the book, and thank you for making intimate lives better for the patients that you take care of and the people that they are intimate with.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Maureen Whelihan, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mace Haroff. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the I'm Giving Notice podcast. I certainly have. Keep an open mind. Share this with people who can benefit from it. And until next time, take control of life's big three, your career, your relationships, and your health, and you'll have a better life. Until then, this is Mace Haroff. Bye-bye.
This has been the I'm Giving Notice podcast with Mace Haroff. For show notes and more information about how you can take control of life's big three, please visit www.imgivingnotice.com.